Life is inherently limited. Preaching the practice of moksha is not natural. This sutra includes many words that are not easily translated but that would need to be explained. Because Sanskrit is an ancient language, its connotations and style are different than modern languages. One would need to know Sanskrit as a whole. In this context, svabhavata means inherently, by its own properties. For example, a tree has the tendency to grow up toward the sky, water has the tendency to flow downward, flowers have the tendency to open, etc. Badhasya means bounded by, limited, restricted by, tied up by. The word life is not actually expressed here in the text, but it is the implied subject of the sutra. Life is a bundle of its own tendencies. All beings on earth are bound to follow certain rules. They have their limits that cannot be changed. They are natural. The word moksha means to get rid of, to be detached from, to give up, to finish relationships. When a human being dies, this is natural. Everybody dies. But we cannot just decide from one moment to the next to die and get rid of ourselves on our own so easily. Moksha is getting rid of the self, rising above the self. It is confusing because it is not part of what we associate with life. It would be like if an infant were deciding what his mother and father are supposed to do as work. That is not natural. Such decisions are not made by children. Here the author of the sutra, Yogi Kapil, is opposing the idea of Ashtanga yoga practice where samadhi is called the ultimate state of yoga and where samadhi is also called moksha. This verse does not support the opinion that samadhi is the aim of life. The Vedic style involves free thinking, and this is why the Vedic system cannot be considered a religion. Each treatise has its own style and presents its own reasoning. It is not an orthodox system. This sutra says that moksha is not a right of life, whereas others say it is the aim of life. This is what makes these treatises inherently democratic. To consider the Vedas to be part of the religion of Hinduism is a great mistake. The inherent nature of a thing is stable. It cannot be changed or removed because that inherent nature is the proof of its existence. This sutra further explains the preceding verse. Life is a bundle of certain characteristics and properties, which themselves are proof of the existence of life itself. For example, the growth of a tree is proof that the tree exists. Flowing is the proof of water. Heat is the proof of fire. These properties cannot be changed. There is no such thing as a cold fire, for example. This clarifies the understanding of what inherent means. Inherent qualities prove the very existence of something, and each being has its own personality. If a tiger becomes a vegetarian, it will no longer be a tiger, and a flying cow will no longer be considered a cow because it will have changed its characteristics. This sutra feels like very modern reasoning. Kapila actually seems to be a much more advanced materialist than some people are today. What is even more fascinating is that he is talking about life and its functions without ever using or mentioning any concept of God or divinity. Belief and faith is not part of philosophy, which requires evidence and logic. It does not make sense to teach a method that will not produce results. A lot is hidden in this sutra. If you do something with no results, that action is actually like not acting at all. There is no point in attempting to change something that is unchangeable, for example. Today we see that people do not understand this. For example, they believe that they can change people, like somebody who expects that because they get married to an alcoholic, that person will then stop being an alcoholic. If a patient is supporting his or her own disease, there is no point in treating that person, because there will be no change. It does not make sense to expend effort in such a case. If one wants to change the curly tail of a dog, one can stick it in a pipe to straighten it, but the moment one takes the pipe off, the tail will begin to curl again, because it cannot grow otherwise. If one considers a white cloth or a seed, then this is a continuation of the previous sutra. If whiteness is inherent to cloth, then we can add colors to the cloth, but it will not change the fact that when we rinse the colors away, the cloth will return to its whiteness. Please note that this sutra was written before synthetic colors existed. Similarly, if there is a forest fire, people may not expect that anything will grow again, but seeds will grow because that is their inherent quality. And again, this was written before nuclear energy was discovered, which is something that can render a seed sterile. Wetness is inherent to water. If one removes this quality, the water is not water anymore. If one removes heat, there is no fire. This inherency is a part of the meaning of the gunas, the properties. An entity cannot remain the same or identical to itself once its qualities change. Teaching or preaching of what is fruitless makes no sense, because manifestation or lack of manifestation is always dependent on its own inherent power, Agni, Shakti. Every existence is constantly due to the effort of its own power to exist. That power is always imperceptible. All that we perceive is what is manifest. We can never perceive the hidden power. In Ayurveda and Vedic philosophy, there are two important words. One is padartha, which means matter, and the other is tattva, which means the power of existence. The human mind does not perceive tattva, but through the mind's analogical ability, we can infer this power. Tattva causes the existence of matter. Each thing in the world has its own tattva. The behavior of matter is a visible projection of tattva. In some yoga books we can see the phrase tattva jnana, which is sometimes defined as soul, spirit, etc. The manifestation of the human body is a consequence of tattva, and matter cannot be separated from its power of existence. Tattva can only be understood through analogy and thinking. Today people may have a problem with this because we are constantly thinking mostly about padartha, what is materially visible. It is not modern to think about tattva. Ayurveda and yoga are constantly trying to explain this ancient concept, which is eternally applicable and true. Modern knowledge is knowledge about matter, and knowledge of tattva is an etiological approach. Ayurveda and yoga focus on etiology. This makes them not so easy to understand, because today we are very focused on matter. For example, listening just to the words that are being said is a materialistic approach, but understanding that which is implied but unsaid is the etiological approach. Zoologists understand animal behavior, and this is a tattvic approach. The horse whisperer, or the people who understand the language used by ants, use an extraordinary approach of thinking. They analogically analyze the causes of the animal's behavior. Because the soul is eternal, it cannot be fused with time, which otherwise fuses with all else that exists. The verse uses the word nitya, which means something that constantly, eternally exists. People are not eternal, but the soul, which existed before the life of any individual, will still exist when the individual is gone. We are limited in time, but the soul is not. Nobody knows when it started, or if it will ever finish. The term Kala Yogata means combining with time. Yoga here does not mean exercises, but it means a union, and that was clear at the time this was written to the people who were using the word, which is why the ingredients of that union are not specified here. Whatever we perceive with our senses is stula, gross. Our senses unaided cannot perceive the atoms matter is made of. We see what is gross. But everything gross is actually composed of what is slukshma, subtle, compounds of various qualities that cluster together until something gross exists. The basic element of all that exists is Brahma, the coefficient. From that root element in Vedic philosophy, the entire universe is made. Kala Yoga means a union with time, and everything that exists is in union with time. The soul, however, is timeless. Sarva here means all, everybody, everything, and sambandhat means to be related. All living entities have a relationship with time, which applies to them. Soul is never dependent on time, or fused with it or limited by it. Living creatures have a beginning, middle, and end in time, and that means that they belong in the category of the material world. The level of Purusha is the level of the soul, and the level of Prakriti is the level of the material. Today we are confused because we speak of people having souls or spirits, but the level of soul is beyond the material level. Our emotions, our sense of identity, are the illusion of the ego. This is like when we switch on a light. The light bulb exists and is connected to a light source, but if the switch is off, there will be no light. When we switch on the light, then the time of the light shining begins. For everything that exists, the soul is what takes the action of turning it on, beginning its ahamkar, its identity, which will only run for a certain time. The soul is also what turns off the light.